Welcome back to Southeastern Game Day, where we bring you pre-game coverage of all things Class 6A football in the great state of Indiana. Hi, I'm your host, Jackson Bixler, joined by my partners, Jackson Joyce, Dylan Cope, and Marcus Laux.
It's great to be here. It's great to talk football. Saturday, we got college football on this week, and just getting back into the swing of things. We saw a glimpse of teams in week 1. I'm excited to see what teams can do in week 2. Got some better matchups this week. Even though we did have some good ones last week, we got some good ones, and it's going to be good to watch.
Yeah, football is back and rolling, and we're going to do a little recap on last year in IHSA Class 6A football. Brownsburg Bulldogs, reigning state champs this year, had a really strong year last year. A lot of great talent on that roster. They're returning. They are the number 1 team in the state, and they are a top 50 team in the country this year. We're going to go into their matchup. They play the Cathedral Fighting Irish, the number 1 team in Class 5A. We got a great game on our hands. Brownsburg, heavy offense, and just really good skill players, really good weapons. Wide receiver Brandon Sharp, multiple D1 offers, and he really just has it all. He's quick with his feet, great with his hands. Really can just do it all out there in the wide receiver position.
It's going to be a great matchup no matter what. You saw Cathedral in 6A last year. They didn't have the season they were hoping for, losing to Ellen in the sectional. But they're still a good team, and Brownsburg can't let this game go. Because if they let this game go, they'll be pretty mad because they are the standard for high school football in Indiana. They have the target on their back. They're the ones that people schedule, circle on their schedule. I think it's going to be a great game, but I don't see Cathedral in 5A beating a top team in 6A, the top team in 6A. They beat a great Archbishop Spalding team last week, 36-23. The defense was sound. The offense looked good. They were moving the ball. The Bulldogs have the firepower to win this game easily.
No, yeah, and you talk about the Bulldogs being like a central team in Indiana that has been the standard for so long. They have been a powerhouse in high school football for so long. Like you said, state champions last year, and they just reel in talent every year. And like Jackson said with Brandon Sharp, the kid's unreal. He has multiple D1 offers, and their quarterback Oscar Fry has multiple D1 offers as well. And they just use the talent up to their best ability and use them to a T. And it's great to see how much they've been a powerhouse these last couple years.
Just bouncing off of what you guys both said, like Brownsburg's team has been like everyone's Super Bowl. Like going to play Brownsburg is like your Super Bowl. Like everyone wants to beat them. They've had a target on their back, like Marcus said, and they just have an outstanding offense, all returning. Jackson talked about Brent Sharp, over almost 1,200 receiving yards last year. That's just crazy. And their quarterback, Oscar Fry, had almost 2,500 yards and 23 touchdowns. So, it's going to be – I think the Cathedral defense is great, but I don't think it's good enough to stop this powerhouse of a Brownsburg offense.
They do hold a good Ben Davis team who – it's not bad. Ben Davis is a good football team year in and year out. They hold them to 0 points, a shutout. It might have been a boring game. Offense might have not been moving the ball as well on both sides, Cathedral and Ben Davis, but – that's impressive. Like a shutout in your first game for any defense, it's impressive. So this Cathedral defense, is gonna have some stops on Brownsburg.
Yeah, and I think they rely on their defense a lot, and I think that's where their issue comes in. Relying on your defense can only get you so far. You have to score points to win football games, and only 8 points in your first game. Like Marcus did say, Ben Davis is a good football team. They've been a good football team in the state of Indiana. I just find their offense pretty weak. And I think offensively, their pass game is all short. They don't really have explosive plays. I think their longest pass was 33 yards. But they did move the ball a little bit, and that's how they got 8 points. But I think they're just going to have to find other ways to score tonight. And if they don't do that, it's definitely going to be a big struggle for them.
And I think that the Irish should focus on the run game. As we see last year, Xavier Dangerfield had 1,087 yards rushing last year with 16 touchdowns. And that's just domination. You don't really see that out of high school football players these days. And just over 1,000 yards rushing is something that's unbelievable, especially high school, college, and the pro level. So I think that's something that they should focus on. But like you said, I just don't think their pass game is as long as other schools, and especially Brownsburg, as with the receivers and the quarterback. So I think it's going to be a defensive battle for both teams, obviously with Cathedral only giving up 0 points against Ben Davis. But, I think it's going to be a great game.
Let me ask you this, Bix. You're the host of our show here. We talked about Sharp and his wide receiver abilities. Great, skilled wide receiver. 10 1v1s. You have 10 1v1s to strap him up, and they got their quarterback. You think you're doing it? 10.
Nah.
10 times.
At least once?
At least once. Just once.
I got to get my hand in at least once, surely, right?
You got the speed with him?
I don't know. If
You,
it's
you don't got the footwork.
if it's
Just jam the inside shoulder. That's all you need.
Hey,
man.
yeah, I'd get up on the line. I'd press a little bit. 10, man, I'd get one.
You get one.
Surely I'd get one. Bad pass.
All you gotta do is get the inside shoulder.
I got to
and
get a
the
hand
inside
in there.
side.
I think I get one.
We'll have to send this his way.
Yeah,
Maybe get that set
maybe
up.
he'll see this. Brownsburg's not very far from Fishers. You know where to find me.
We'll be
You
there
know
in
where to find me.
We'll be there in about 7 weeks. We'll
Yeah.
be there in 7 weeks, so we'll see.
On to another game. A big statement team in the state of Indiana, Center Grove Trojans. We saw they're going against Carroll Chargers this week. We saw Carroll last week as they played our team, HSE Royals. Carroll just a big D line. Their defense held us to 14 points, but only scored 7. Against HSE's defense, like HSE, arguably a top defense in the state, but I think Carroll is definitely going to have to find ways to score against the Center Grove Trojans.
Yeah, I think this Carroll defense is really good, though. Terry Walker's a hard person to stop, and even a hard person to probably like that. The Royals' offense is good. Like, the HSE has a great team, and to hold them to 14 points is good. They just didn't have the production on offense that they need. But that's all fixable. That's all fixable stuff, and HSE is a top defense in the state this year. They got a lot of returning players, especially inside the box at linebacker. We'll get to that when we get to their game versus North Central. But it's just the production on offense that I don't see Carroll having to be a powerhouse in Center Grove. Center Grove's defense is they hit hard. They're nasty. They choose violence. They'll get the ball from you. They'll make stops, and their offense obviously is good year in and year out. So I don't think Carroll is where they are at this season. Right now, week 2, it's early though. Carroll is a good team up north, and they're going to have their way up north. But when they come down to Indy, I don't see them beating a team in Indy.
No, and I think that Carroll's offense has the ability to be as good as they think they can be, especially with how fast and how quick they play on offense. And you saw them give the Royals some challenges on defense, especially, and you said that being a top defense in the state, them giving the Royals, putting the pressure on the Royals and causing them to maybe be on the back foot a little bit, that was something that obviously nobody really expected, but they did. And I think that's something that I'm very interested to see is that how Carroll's offense can take charge against the physical defense that is the Center Grove Trojans. And the quick plays and the quick passes, like you saw Frissinger get the ball and immediately pass it to their wide receivers. Like, it was something that you don't really see out of high school. You see a lot of like waiting and huddling and all that stuff, but I just think that's something that I'm interested to see is how can their offense play against this tough Trojans defense.
Yeah, and Center Grove is a run-heavy offense. I mean, Oscar Sloan, their sophomore quarterback, went 8 for 11, which is really good, but he only had 71 passing yards. So, I mean, Nolan Reese had 20 carries for 139 yards. So, I think it is a necessity for this Carroll defense, especially with their big D line, to stop the run game because they did a really good job of that against HSE, making Terry Walker roll out and throw the ball. So, I think that is a necessity for the Carroll defense.
And I would say if you saw the line that Center Grove has year in and year out, like, why don't you run the ball every single play? Because you're getting 4 or 5 yards every single play.
No, they got some big boys up there.
Huge. And you think about it, and you're like, how do some of these teams even go up against that? And NC's got a big line too. Like, we're gonna talk about that game later, but there's some big boys on Center Grove, and that's a powerhouse year in and year out.
And I think one thing that Center Grove's used to their advantage is the run game. I think they waste a lot of clock. I think they make teams, make smart decisions with their timeouts, and they work the coaches. It's not just about the players in that game. I think that's one thing how Center Grove beats other teams, and maybe when other teams have, a better roster, which is not very often when it comes to Center Grove, but I think that's how they've been so good and so dominant year in and year out. I think that's one way how they're going to control this game against the Carroll Chargers. We'll be right back shortly after this break.
Welcome to the bundle event. Entering now are undisputed tag team champions, the mid-size SUV and the mid-century modern. Together with a State Farm agent, this auto and home duo are a powerful force of savings, service, and customizable coverage. Now, let's get ready to bundle.
Go Royals!
Availability and amount of discounts and savings vary by state.
Welcome back to Southeastern Game Day. You know, Bo Bradle's State Farm Agency is a proud supporter of Hamilton Southeastern Athletics, Hamilton Southeastern's high school good neighbor and top choice. Putting you first made us number one. Visit BoBradleInsurance.com. You know, back into the games this week, we really do have more great matchups along the way. Fishers versus Lawrence North. You know, Fishers, I wouldn't say upset, but I think definitely shocked of how their game went week one. You know, the Carmel Greyhounds came in to Fishers and took care of business and really set the tone for their season this year. And I think Fishers is walking away from that game with a little bit of a sour taste in their mouth, just a little confused on what happened. They still did score 24 points, and I think they're going to have to – I think this is a bounce-back game for them. They scheduled 2 non-conference games right out of the gate, and I think this is a test for them, and I think this is where they show what kind of team they're going to be this year.
Yeah, iron sharpens iron, right? You wanna play those big games early in the year, because then week 4 you got the biggest game of your season. You play HSE in the biggest rivalry in Indiana high school football, so it's good to test the waters and see really what you got, because you're facing adversity when you play a team like Carmel and a team like LN week 1 and week 2. So yes, I think the whole state was shocked, but not necessarily at how Fishers lost, but how Carmel won. Anthony Colner, he's legit. He's a great athlete. I was watching in the first quarter, maybe on the first few drives, maybe it was the second quarter. He hit the hole and he scrambled for about 40 yards, and he was hitting the jets.
He had 112 rushing yards that game.
Yeah, and big chunk was that one play. So that's something that you got to deal with when you play Carmel's offense as well. But I'm surprised that Gage Sturgill and Ryan didn't get it going for this Fishers team. Like, Gage Sturgill is someone that can take over a game, and so is Ryan. He's that elusive back, but he runs over people. Like, he's not shying away from contact when he's about to get tackled. He's going to try to run through you and hurt you. So I'm surprised on this Fishers offense that they didn't have more production, but I also think that Carmel's just really good. Like, Carmel's really good. They got the new coach in there, Kevin Wright.
Yeah, Hall of Fame coach.
Yeah,
by the way.
He coached at Indiana.
Also coached at IMG.
And is coming back. So yeah, I think this Carmel team's going to be legit all year, every single week. They're going to be a team to watch this year.
And going back to what you said about, thinking that Gage Sturgill and Tim Balimbu could get it going at some point, and we've seen firsthand how much they can get it going. Last year against us personally, he had 3 touchdowns in the game, and both receiving and rushing. So it's like a dual threat with that in that certain area. But I just think that they're going to bounce back from this. I think they're going to learn from their mistakes, especially the defense. Basically Carmel had their way with their defense scoring 48 points, and
49.
49, excuse me, and they just had their way with them. And I think that the Tigers going into their locker room after the game and going through film this entire week saying, what do we need to do to take over the game against a very solid LN team and make sure we do enough to win, and especially both defense and offense, because I think that the offense will learn. And they didn't score little points. They had 24, and that's enough to win a game for some teams. So I think that they'll bounce back and they'll learn from their mistakes and be ready for tonight's game. And
I do want to say, Gage Sturgill had production. Right here it says he had 250 yards and went 19 for 27 with 2 touchdowns. Like, it just wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough, and you got to get more if you're going to play a good team like Carmel, whose obviously offense is really good, scoring that many points. You got to have more from the senior quarterback.
Yeah, and Lawrence North barely squeezed it out against Lawrence Central in an OT thriller. So I think Lawrence North coming off maybe not their best game. I'm not for sure how good Lawrence Central is this year, but I think what Fishers needs to do is, like we've been talking about, dialing it in with Gage Sturgill and Ryan Tim Balimbu. Gage Sturgill and Ryan have been playing with each other since the youth days, so they have that chemistry there. Fisher's offense has that chemistry there. They just need to work it out. And it's not like they didn't score, like Marcus said. I mean, they still scored, 28 points?
24.
24 points. So, I mean, that's still, like, good offense. It's just it wasn't enough, like we said.
Yeah, and I think, LN, like Joyce said, came off of a really close game. They found their offense with the running game. Xavier Moore, 155 rushing yards in week 1, and I think that's how they're going to have to beat Fishers. They do have a lot of wide receiver talent. That one receiver that is number 11th in the country.
Yeah, he's got about every offer. Monchan, I think it is.
Yeah, he's just dominant. And I think their offense definitely can control the game, but I think Fishers is, Fishers is going to figure out a way to get their get back on this one. Ryan Timbalimbu, 125 rushing yards and a touchdown. Along with Vincent Rosie's 2 receiving touchdowns with 6 receptions, and I think Gage Sturgill, awesome. He played a great game, 250 passing yards and 19 for 27 with 2 touchdowns. So I think their offense is going to get it done, and I think Fisher's defense will be able to hold Lawrence North on this one.
Yeah, I think the leaders in that room too, Ryan and Gage, they've set the locker room straight after this loss. I can guarantee you that. And Coach Funk knows what he's doing. They have a culture there at Fishers, and they have a standard, and they're going to live up to it this week for sure.
Yeah, and it's something that I think the Tigers defense obviously knows what they have coming towards them this week. And like you just said, I feel like Sturgill and Timbalimbu have probably instilled that into the defense, especially with the production last week. Like you said about Xavier Moore and Munchin Sales, like they both had over 500 yards receiving and 1,300 yards rushing. Moore had 22 touchdowns last year rushing. I don't know if that was just rushing or both passing in or receiving and rushing, but both of those guys are definitely forces to be reckoned with, and you've got to plan for those. I'm sure the Tigers plan for those 2 players immensely this week, because there's no way you go in a game plan thinking those 2 players aren't going to be a big factor in that game. And I just think both teams are solid, and I think it's going to be a great game, and I think it'll be really close. Very high scoring too.
Yeah,
so many good matchups.
No, there just are. I think we're noticing a lot of teams are going to start scheduling harder games to begin with. To begin their season, and everybody makes playoffs. It's not like college football, so no one has to worry about.
It's about momentum, though.
Yeah, you gotta. Yeah, I think like Hope said, about momentum, and I think you find out who your team is in the first couple games. Win or lose, it's about how you respond. I think some teams do need to face adversity to find out who they are. Now on to Ben Davis Avon. Avon HCC team. Ben Davis. They've been a great program in the state of Indiana. Did score 0 points though versus the Cathedral Irish. 193 total offensive yards, but defense held Cathedral to only 8 points. So there are some negative and positives to look at. I'm interested to see how they will play this game out. Avon beat Decatur Central 30-28 in overtime. Sean Curry 103 receiving yards with 3 touchdowns. So we can tell that Avon does have great offensive power, but Ben Davis has a great defense. So I wonder how that will match up and how they will pan up against each other. Avon standout sophomore linebacker Silas Cross, 16 total tackles in game 1. I mean, that's just that guy was all over the ball. Getting to the gaps. Finding the guy with the ball and making some tackles, making some plays for their defense. And so I think Avon's defense is really going to handle Ben Davis's offense well. And as we saw against Cathedral, they don't really have much of one. So I think they're going to keep them down and keep their foot on their neck.
Yeah, I haven't seen much of both these teams, and a lot of these teams. It's week 1, but I feel like every single year Avon's calling for a rebirth of their program. And every year HSE comes in and shows them what's up and shows them what 6A looks like, and shows them what the top of the HCC looks like. I honestly don't know about this game. I know Avon has a great quarterback who's returning from last year. No. He graduated. He was going to play at Wisconsin or somewhere.
He was like low Division 1. Yeah, Division 1.
But I can't call this game, honestly. I want to go with the HCC and go Avon and go with the Orioles.
Yeah, I mean, like Marcus said, I don't know too much about either of these teams, but I think if Sean Curry can play how he did, I mean, 3 touchdowns and over 100 yards is outstanding. And if Chase Cameron can pass for over 150 yards, I mean, I think if they can play how they did last week, I think they should be able to beat this Ben Davis team. But Ben Davis probably does have a fire under their butt because they just didn't score a single point against Cathedral. So
Yeah, they're gonna have to find ways to move the ball. I mean, 193 total offensive yards, and Davion Davis 86 receiving yards, but that wasn't enough to even get in field goal range.
And this is the same Ben Davis team that played IMG a couple years back, week 1.
Yeah.
So
And has won state
and won the state
times.
championship 2 years ago. So a lot can change, and a lot can
Shout out
change in
Greg Pope.
2 years. Indiana football changes like this.
And like the thing I'm thinking about is if the Ben Davis offense can't produce points versus Cathedral's defense, what are they going to do against Avon's defense? Where, like you said, what's his name? Silas Cross, 16 total tackles. I mean, the kid was all over the field. So like you have to go around that kid, and it's not just one player. Obviously, it's a whole defense. But I think that the HCC is improving in talent, and I think that the defenses in the HCC are very tough to get by. And I really think that if Ben Davis couldn't produce points against Cathedral's defense, what are they going to do against Avon's defense when they have a player, obviously, that can tackle practically everybody on the field? It's just a matter of how they go about it and what they do to get over it.
Coming up next, our game of the week, Westfield Shamrocks versus the Carmel Greyhounds. We'll be right back shortly after this ad break.
Welcome to the bundle event. Entering now our undisputed tag team champions, the mid-size SUV and the mid-century modern. Together with a State Farm agent, this auto and home duo are a powerful force of savings, service, and customizable coverage. Now, let's get ready to bundle.
Go Royals!
Availability and amount of discounts and savings vary by state.
Welcome back to Southeastern Game Day. Guys, we've had some great games that we've talked about so far. Great matchups this week. But the SSN game of the week is going to the Westfield Shamrocks versus the Carmel Greyhounds.
I mean, yeah, it's a huge rivalry. I wouldn't put it up there with the Mudsock rivalry, but it is definitely a big crosstown rivalry. I mean, Westfield has a pretty solid team. Deacon King, a senior with multiple D1 offers, rushed for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns. Aiden Grabowski went for 7 for 17 with 61 total passing yards, and the defense held Homestead to 0 points. But I think Anthony Colner and this new coach and the Carmel offense is just too much for this Westfield defense.
Yeah, I think, as we talked about Carmel before, a new coach setting a new culture in the program. Kevin Wright, a Hall of Fame coach at Indiana as a tight ends coach at IMG Academy. He's back and he's ready to bring Carmel back to, that Carmel standard. Carmel's been a powerhouse in almost every sport in the state of Indiana, and I think they're back to do that, and they're being led by Anthony Colner, Troy commit, back there at quarterback, led the team with 112 rushing yards as a quarterback and 3 rushing touchdowns, but also 188 passing yards and a passing touchdown. So I think Carmel's offense is very, very powerful this year, but as we saw, Westfield's defense got the job done in shutting out Homestead.
Yeah, one thing that definitely won't help the Shamrocks is Caleb Darts, Westfield's number 1 receiver or leading receiver last week, is out with a hand injury for 4 to 6 weeks. So I think that'll definitely impact the Shamrocks negatively and help out the Greyhounds if they need it.
Yeah, and I mean, as we see, their passing game is already not the best. So, your star receiver going down is, not what you want.
And I think that their offense is primarily with the run game, as we see in the stat sheet. King had 160 yards rushing with 2 touchdowns, and I think that's where the Shamrocks offense stems from. I think, like you just said, the passing game is not that great. So obviously losing a player like that is huge for any team, no matter what game they primarily use. But I think the run game will be something that the Shamrocks obviously will rely heavy on in this game, especially with their best wide receiver going down.
Look, when your backs are against the wall and you're facing adversity is when you see a real team come out. And that's what Westfield's going against right now. Everyone's raving about this new Carmel team, this new coaching staff, these transfers that are coming in from Carmel. Well, guess what? The Shamrocks are a 6A powerhouse, and I'm not going against them. I'm taking the Shamrocks.
Yeah, I think the Shamrocks are I think they're a great team. I think, the one thing they struggle with right now is finding out who's going to lead this team offensively. We know that their star running back, Deacon King, like we've talked about, is very explosive, very quick, very, very big. I think he's going to find a way to, help this Westfield offense get some points on the board tonight. And I think their defense is going to, shock some people a little bit, shock the state. And I think they're going to maybe send Carmel a reality check and show them who runs this rivalry.
And I mean, when you go up against a quarterback who had triple digits in both categories, rushing and passing, he's expecting to do that same thing this week. And I think that the Shamrocks defense just will have a chip on their shoulder, especially after losing key player on offense and just, like Marcus said, being a powerhouse overall. I mean, they've won state before, and they've been so good these past couple years. And I really think that this Shamrocks defense could give some promises out to the world.
Yeah, now on to our game, HSC, the Royals. They're going to North Central to send a little bit of a reality check. North Central won their first game since 2021. Been over 4 years since North Central has won a football game. They're under new coach Colin Coffer and led by sophomore quarterback Chase Groves, who threw for 338 passing yards. I don't care what level of football you're playing at. That is just impressive across the board. 338 passing yards. North Central Panthers really like to air it out.
Yeah, I sat in on Thursday's meeting, special teams, Coach Hudson, great coach. He said, we're coming in and reality is coming off that bus for these Panthers. And we're going into North Central, we're shutting the gate, and they're not going to be able to get out.
Wolfpack is back, baby.
That's what this game is meaning to HSC, because it's personal, because they think this NC team is back. But let me tell you right now, you can't lose 4 years straight and be back after you beat a lower class team in Burbuff Jesuit, whose secondary did not look promising at all, and their wide receivers ran all over the secondary. And let me tell you this. I watched the game. I watched the Burbuff North Central game, and North Central's secondary will not be able to compete against our star power in Terry Walker, Penny Baker, Barry, Toner. Our wide receivers, Colin Walls as well, at the tight end position. I think a reality check is coming for North Central in the whole school district this week.
No, and I think that North Central obviously is coming off a high from last week, but the Royals, they're just one of the most physical teams I've seen in the state of Indiana, along with others. But one thing that I see could be being a downside to the Royals is the amount of injuries that they have going in this game. Like you mentioned earlier, Kyan Kelly, great cornerback for us, has multiple D1 offers. I don't think he's not playing. Right?
Out with the calf strain.
And Hunter Brandenberger out. Jackson Toll, the long snapper, will be playing in the center position for the Royals offensive line, going up against 6'3", 330-pound nose guard Anton Ellis. And I think this is the first time Toll has played center since freshman year, I think.
This guy is huge, and he blocks the A gap and the B gap. So if Carter wants to get in there, or if the Royals offense wants to run that gap, it's got to be the most perfectly executed O-line that HSE has probably ever seen, because this guy is huge and he disrupts the middle of the trenches.
And the secondary has a couple issues too, like with Kyan Kelly being out. Kyle Jenkins moving down to corner, and Tristan Christofferson, his brother Zach Christofferson, is out with a PCL injury and will not play. And Tristan Christofferson will be in the safety position, moving Kyle Jenkins down to corner. And Kyle Jenkins has the experience in the corner position. He did really well with it last year as a junior, and I don't think it'll be too much of an issue for the Royals, as they've proven that they have the physicality, the smart defensive plays, and all that stuff. And I think that obviously 338 passing yards isn't something you can just gloss over. I mean, they have a lot of RPOs in their offense, but RPOs can be efficient, especially tricking the defense into thinking one thing and then obviously going with another thing. So I think it's going to be a game of a lot of things, but I think passing is going to be the theme of the game for both teams, especially with the O-line changes for the Royals.
Yeah, and I think HSC's defense, especially like Marcus said, our secondary is outstanding. I mean, even without Kyan, I think we still have enough. Henry Wands had an outstanding game last week, 2 interceptions. I mean, Kyan did put up a great game. He had one interception, 1 forced fumble, and even recorded a passing touchdown. So, I mean, he's all over the field. And I just think that this HSC defense is too much for the North Central offense, and I just think HSC is going to put it away, to be honest.
Yeah, holding Carroll to 7 points. HSC do commit quarterback Terry Walker III, 12 for 24, 126 passing yards, and 1 receiving touchdown, on a trick play. And I think, Royals do have great coaches, and I think the coaches are gonna lead the players in the right position. This defense called by Coach Purcell, great coach, great defensive mind, and I mean our defense got to the quarterback 9 times against the Carroll Chargers and forced 3 interceptions and a forced fumble. So if that doesn't show you how good of a defense HSC really has, I don't know what will. And I think that's how they're going to handle this game tonight. I think, our defense is going to set the tone. I think the Royals will get to the quarterback, put pressure on that O-line, and I think I love our linebackers. I think
our linebacker room this year is legit because we got a lot of returning players, and even in junior who didn't play last year, Hogue. I mean, he got to the quarterback and was in the backfield almost every single play.
Yeah, I mean, he started last year but suffered a season-ending injury, which was just heartbreaking. But he's back, and he's going to get to the quarterback whether you guys like it or not. So I'm excited to see how this Royal defense handles coming off of a 338 passing yard game of Chase Groves.
And a lot of that is RPO. So that's run pass option. And they got a good running back. They got a big line, like we said earlier in the show. It's going to be tough to blitz, I think, for HSC when you got the RPO offense. I think Purcell, the defensive coordinator for HSC, is going to be hesitant to blitz because of how much RPO he saw in the first game. Because once you blitz, you're coming, you're bringing the house, and that's when a quick slant or a deep ball comes over in man-on-man coverage. Especially with Kyan Kelly, who's our best man-on-man receiver. I don't think HSE is going to pressure the quarterback as much as we saw last week against Carroll's offense.
Yeah, I just think, I think HSE is going to get it done on the defensive end, and I think they're going to figure out how to get this offense going a little bit this week and show who they really are going to be this season. We'll be right back shortly with our picks for this week's games after this ad.
Welcome to the bundle event. Entering now our undisputed tag team champions, the mid-size SUV and the mid-century modern. Together with a State Farm agent, this auto and home duo are a powerful force of savings, service, and customizable coverage. Now, let's get ready to bundle.
Go Royals!
Availability and amount of discounts and savings vary by state.
Welcome back to Southeastern Gameday, where we're going to go into our picks for this week's matchups, week 2 of Class 6A Indiana High School football. Starting off with game 1, as we talked about, Brownsburg, number 1 team in 6A versus number 1 team in 5A, the Cathedral Fighting Irish. With this game, I got the Brownsburg Bulldogs. I just think their offense is too powerful, and in my opinion, I don't think Cathedral is very good as they have been, and I think they dropped down in class for a reason, and I think scoring only 8 points against Ben Davis is not a good sign, and I think Brownsburg can handle business.
Yeah, I had Brownsburg in this one. The top dog. There's not much to say. Very good, nationally ranked, great, sound defense, and obviously a lot of returning star power on offense. I got the Bulldogs.
I'm going to agree with both of you. I have the Bulldogs in this game. Obviously, Brownsburg offense, having the players that they have and having the defense that they have, like you said, I just don't think the Cathedral Fighting Irish are going to be able to handle all of it. I think that both sides are going to struggle in the pass game specifically, and just I don't think their offense can produce much besides the run game, and I think the Brownsburg defense is really good against the run game. So I'm taking the Bulldogs with this game.
To make it a clean sweep, I'm going to have to go with the Bulldogs. I mean, I just think Brownsburg's team all around is too much for the Fighting Irish. I think offensively I don't think there's any holes. Defensively there's no holes. All around this team is just outstanding. Like Marcus said, nationally ranked. I think it's just too much for Cathedral.
Yeah, and I just think I really just don't see in a world that Brownsburg will lose this game. I think they're going to handle business and show why they're in Class 6A football. Next on to Center Grove versus Carroll. You know, like we said, we watched Carroll last week. Didn't really impress us much, you know, the struggle to score the ball. But, you know, their defense was good. Their defense tamed our quarterback, you know, Terry Walker III, do commit, not being able to pass for what he wanted to. But I just think that Center Grove has just been too much of a monumental team in the past. And I think, you know, with coaching and their quarterback, Oscar Sloan, who's very accurate, I think they'll be able to get it done. So I got the Trojans in this one.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough charge on this Carroll's offense for the Trojans' defense whatsoever. I'm going to go with the Trojans on this one.
This is a game where I'm kind of torn in between the two because I think that the Carroll defense is it's just so good that you never know what could happen against a team like Center Grove, but it kind of cancels out with how good their offense is. And I'm going to go with Center Grove in this game, but I won't be surprised if the Carroll Chargers pull off what some would say an upset against the Center Grove Trojans.
Yeah, I agree. I think it might be close, but I'm about to go with Center Grove. I think watching Carroll last week, like Jackson said, didn't impress me much. And I know HSC's defense is outstanding, but only scoring 7 points isn't going to be enough for the Center Grove team. And I'm going to have to go with Center Grove for this one.
Yeah, our next game, Fishers versus Lawrence North. You know, Fishers did get upset last week, like we talked about, by the Carmel Greyhounds, but I still think they're going to find a way to get it done and bounce back and show what kind of team they want to be this year. You know, like we talked about, Ryan Tembalimbu, 125 rushing yards with a touchdown, and Vincent Rosie, 2 receiving touchdowns. So I think their offensive power is this. That's what's going to get the job done tonight. And I think, you know, their defense is going to handle business on their side of the ball with the Wildcats.
Yeah, as much as I don't want to pick the Tigers here in this school building, I think they have their locker room right and locked in for this week. I'm going to go with the Tigers.
I'm going to go with the Tigers in this game. I think that, like you said, I think that they will bounce back. I believe that Sturgill, Tim Limbu, and Rosie will still keep that connection that they have between the three. And it's unbelievable how good they can be when they're all on. And they have good defense. Like Tyler Maynard is one player that I think of. He's one of the biggest dudes I've seen on a defensive line besides the guy on North Central. But I think that this offense will really do good things against this solid LN team, but I think the Tigers are going to take the W in this one.
I think it's going to be close, but I'm going to have to go with Lawrence North in this one. I mean, Lawrence North's offense last week, was great. Their quarterback threw for over 150 yards. Their running back rushed for over 150 yards. I mean, if they can do that, I think Fisher's defense lost a lot last year, and I think that the Lawrence North offense can produce against this Fisher's defense.
Now on to Ben Davis versus Avon. You know, Ben Davis, they scored 0 points against Cathedral, and I really don't see how not having an offense is going to win you football game or is going to win you football games. So I just think I really do got the Orioles in this one. I think Avon is going to get it done offensively, but I think their defense is just outstanding. You know, Silas Cross, linebacker, 16 total tackles in week 1. I think Avon is going to show that Ben Davis's offense is not very good this year, and I think the Orioles are going to take down Ben Davis.
Yeah, Avon's saying, at least last year, I think they picked it up this year, defend the Valley. Defend the Valley, Avon Orioles say, and I think that means a lot to them. But I think this Ben Davis team is better than people expected, and I think they're coming up mad after a shutout, and, I mean, losing to a 5A team is embarrassing when you're 6A and just won the state championship. They got a chip on their shoulder. I'm going BD.
I'm going to go with the Avon Orioles in the game. I think that, like you said, the defense is just something that you can't ignore. The fact that Silas had 16 total tackles, I mean, that's just something you don't see. And the offense has this year, I think, has been better than it has been in years past. Yeah, after last year, like you said, coming off with the chip on their shoulder. And I really believe that the Avon Orioles are going to get it done in this week's game.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Avon as well. I think that connection between Sean Curry and Jace Cameron is outstanding. I mean, John Curry alone had 3 touchdowns with over 100 yards, and I think that's too much for Ben Davis with only scoring 0 points.
Now on to the game of the week. The Westfield Shamrocks take on the Carmel Greyhounds. I mean, this game's just a battle between top 2 teams in the state, and I think it's going to be a great game overall. I think the rivalry is going to live up to the hype this year, as it has in past years with Carmel not being as good. But I think, Kevin Wright coming in, a Hall of Fame coach, ready to coach the Carmel Greyhounds and put in a new culture into this program. I think they're going to stay on the hot seat. And I think they're going to just ride this new culture, ride with Anthony Colner leading this team. I got the Carmel Greyhounds in this one.
Look, you can spit out all the facts on these pregame shows you want, but as soon as you step on the field, it in between the lines is when ball gets played. The Hounds are howling. They're looking for a new season after being off the past couple years. They're not used to it. But in the words of LeVar Ball, the Shamrocks about to get rocked. I think this Carmel team's really good. Like Big said, under Kevin Wright, new coaching staff, Carmel's back, guys, and they're looking to take some heads this year. And I think one of them is going to be this Westfield team tonight.
Yeah, and I agree. I'm going to take the Carmel Greyhounds on this game. When your quarterback has triple digits in both categories, there's just something that can't be passed over. And I think that you take a guy that can pass the ball effectively and efficiently and run the ball with great speed, great agility, and ability to get in the end zone. I think that's something that the Shamrocks aren't going to be really expecting, but I still think that it's going to be a very high-scoring game. I don't think that the Shamrocks defense is going to be as sound as it was last week against Homestead, and I think that's going to be maybe both teams scoring over 28 points in this game. I really think it's going to be close, but I am taking the Carmel Greyhounds in our game of the week.
Yeah, I agree. I'm taking Carmel as well. I mean, like Dylan said, Anthony Colner did rush for 3 touchdowns and over 100 yards, but he also passed for over 150 yards and 1 touchdown. And I think that's too much for this Westfield defense. I mean, losing someone like Michael Webster on the defense last year is devastating, just to graduation, obviously, but just as devastating for this Westfield defense. And I think the fall off from Carson Melvin to Aiden Grabowski, I mean, that Carson Melvin, that's some pretty big shoes to fill. And, I mean, Aiden Grabowski is a pretty big kid. I mean, he's like 5'10", like 200 pounds. So I think that this Carmel offense is just going to be too much for this Westfield team.
Yeah, and I think that's just one area where the Shamrocks lack is, passing offense. 7 for 17 with only 61 total passing yards.
Against a Homestead team who
Hasn't been great in the past.
is a free game in HSE's sectional. Like, if we're being honest.
Yeah, no, they have not been great in the past.
You thank the IHSA drawing when you get Homestead in our sectional.
Right.
Yeah, and I just don't see how Westfield's offense is going to get it done tonight. So, that's why I got the Carmel Greyhounds. Now on to, the Hamilton Southeastern Royals led by Coach Michael Kelly. Yeah, they're going into North Central tonight with a chip on their shoulder. They want to show people that North Central might have gotten their first win since 2021, but they're putting an end to that tonight. They're sending a reality check. I got the Royals in this one.
Look, I'm just going to spit out some years, some history of HSE NC real quick. 49-26 Royals, 35-7 Royals, 45-14 Royals, 45-13 Royals. That's the past 4 years of playing NC. And if there's one thing I learned in history class, Mr. Janey, it's history repeats itself. And history is going to repeat itself tonight.
Yeah, obviously I'm taking HSC in this one. I think a reality check is coming for the North Central Panthers, and this game's going to be packed, right? And every student at North Central is probably thinking, oh, we got a chance to be really good this season, which they are definitely better than they have been in years past. But again, they played a Buff team that obviously isn't as good as, say, at the HCC conference. It is what it is.
Or just 6A.
And 6A in general. And I think that, North Central, yes, they're going to be hyped after the win last week, but the Royals only scoring 14 points against the Carroll Chargers defense. I think that that's going to send them over the moon with how much they think that they can do potentially wise. And I really think that the Royals are going to exceed levels that they have never done before, and I really think that the Royals are going to blow them out of the water tonight.
And before you get into it, Jackson, like, this game's going to be better than it has in years past. Like there's no doubt on film this NC team is better. And that's what the coaching staff for HSE in the locker room, the conversations in the locker room have been this week. Hey, this isn't a blow-off game. Now, none of them are, right? Every single game on our schedule is competition, but it's going to be a different game, and there's definitely a lot more buzz and a lot more excitement around HSE and definitely around North Central.
Yeah, looking at the stats, honestly, I think this game might be close. I'm just kidding. Give me Coach Michael Kelly and the Hamilton Southeastern Royals by 1 trillion. I think Coach Michael Kelly will walk into that trap and take over their trap. Give me the Royals by 1 million.
Yeah, I think we're all excited to see how this Royals team can play this year. We got a sneak peek, I would say, in game 1, and I think tonight's game they're going to send a reality check. They're going to put themselves out on the map as one of the top teams in Class 6A this week. So I'm excited. The Royals are going to compete.
Football is back, baby.
Our boys are the boys are buzzing. Our boys are going to go out there, be fighting, and just come out on top. I can't wait. We'll be right back with a new segment called Pick 'em with Bix, talking about a little bit more of high school football in the state of Indiana right after this break.
Welcome to the bundle event. Entering now our undisputed tag team champions, the mid-size SUV and the mid-century modern. Together with a State Farm agent, this auto and home duo are a powerful force of savings, service, and customizable coverage. Now, let's get ready to bundle.
Go Royals!
Availability and amount of discounts and savings vary by state.
Welcome back to Southeastern Game Day, where we go into tonight's last segment called Pick 'em with Bix. We talk about a little bit more about high school football around the state of Indiana. But if I could bet on high school football, I would bet on Brownsburg Bulldogs minus 13.5. And if for a player prop, I would take Terry Walker over 1.5 passing touchdowns. But you can't bet on high school football, and I'm not 21. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Stay tuned for upcoming broadcast. Our next SSN Game Day will be live from Mudsock in just a beautiful atmosphere. Hope you enjoyed tonight's game. Be safe if you're traveling, and goodbye from SSN Studio.